Clara Whitfield stood on the platform in Dust River, Montana Territory, with tears streaming down her face and shame burning in her chest. The stagecoach driver had already thrown her trunk to the dirt. She'd come 2,000 miles to marry a stranger, and now that stranger stood 10 feet away, tall and silent, studying her like she was damaged goods. She couldn't stop crying. She couldn't even breathe right. When Silas Boone finally stepped forward, she braced for rejection. Instead, he removed his hat. "You're safe now," he said quietly, and something inside her broke open. Before we go further, I need you to subscribe to this channel and stay with me till the end of this story. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. Silas Boone had not slept well in 3 years. He'd learned to function on fragments of rest, waking before dawn with his hand already reaching for the rifle that wasn't there anymore. The war had ended. The cavalry had disbanded. The frontier had moved on. But his body hadn't gotten the message. He stood now on the platform in Dust River, watching the stagecoach roll to a stop, and felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came whenever he had to deal with people. He'd ordered a wife the way a man might order seed or livestock: practical, necessary, devoid of sentiment. His ranch was expanding faster than he could manage alone. The land board favored married men. The bank trusted family men. A wife meant legitimacy, stability, a buffer against the wolves circling his property lines. He expected a sturdy woman, middle-aged maybe, someone who'd lived hard and knew how to work harder. The coach door opened. A young woman stepped down, already weeping. Silas felt something twist in his gut. She was small, dark-haired, maybe 24 or 25. Her dress was decent, but worn at the cuffs. Her gloves had been mended more than once. She held herself like she expected to be struck. When her eyes met his, he saw something he recognized immediately. The look of a person who'd been broken by circumstance and was waiting for the next blow. She tried to speak. Her voice came out thin and shaking. "Mr. Boone?" He nodded, didn't move. She swallowed hard. "I'm Clara Whitfield, from St. Louis. Her voice cracked. "I can leave on the next coach if you'd rather. I understand if this isn't what you expected." The stagecoach driver, a grizzled man named Harker, dropped her trunk in the dirt with unnecessary force. "Good luck with that one, Boone," Harker muttered. "Cried the whole way from Billings." Silas turned his head slowly toward Harker. Didn't say a word, just looked at him. Harker cleared his throat and climbed back onto the coach without another comment. Silas turned back to Clara. She was trembling now, arms wrapped around herself, tears still sliding down her face. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. He stepped forward, removed his hat. "You're safe now," he said. She blinked at him, like she'd never heard those words before. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You came a long way," Silas said. "You're tired. You're scared. That's reasonable." He picked up her trunk with one hand. "Let's get you to the ranch. We'll talk there." She didn't move. "You're not sending me back?" "No, ma'am." "But She stopped. Her breath hitched. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you showed up," Silas said. "That's more than most people do." Something shifted in her expression. The fear didn't leave, but it made room for something else. Confusion, maybe, or the faint, fragile beginning of hope. He gestured toward the wagon. "Come on, it's a 2-hour ride." She followed him on unsteady legs. The ride started in silence. Silas didn't push. He'd learned a long time ago that people talked when they were ready, and pushing only made them retreat further. Clara sat beside him on the wagon bench, hands folded in her lap, staring at the empty prairie rolling out in every direction. The wind was cold. Autumn was settling in hard. After 20 minutes, she spoke. "I need to tell you something." "All right." She took a shaky breath. "I didn't come here for adventure. I came here because I had nowhere else to go." Silas kept his eyes on the road. "That's honest." "There was a man in St. Louis," she said. Her voice was flat now, like she'd told this story too many times and it had stopped feeling real. "His father owned the factory where I worked. He pursued me for months. I refused him, repeatedly." She paused. He didn't like being refused. Silas felt his jaw tighten. "He spread rumors," Clara continued. "Told people I'd encouraged him, that I'd led him on and then rejected him to damage his reputation. He said I was trying to extort his family." She laughed bitterly. "I was a seamstress. I made $8 a week. But that didn't matter. His word was gold. Mine was dirt." "What happened?" Silas asked quietly. "I was fired, evicted from my boarding house. The church I'd attended for 3 years asked me to leave." Her voice broke. "No one defended me. No one even asked for my side. They just believed him, because he was a man with money, and I was nobody." Silas didn't say anything. He didn't trust himself to speak without sounding angry, and she didn't need his anger right now. "I saw an advertisement for mail-order brides," Clara said. "I thought, maybe out here, no one would know. Maybe I could start over." She turned to look at him. "But you deserve to know the truth. If you don't want me anymore, I understand. I'll go back to Billings, find work there." Silas pulled the wagon to a stop. Clara's face went pale. "I'm sorry. I should have told you in the letters, but I was afraid." "Look at me," Silas said. She met his eyes. Hers were red and swollen from crying. "Out here," Silas said slowly, "a person's worth is measured by work and truth, not whispers, not reputation. What you do matters. What you say matters. But what people say about you?" He shook his head. "That's just noise." She stared at him. "You believe me?" "I've seen enough men lie to know what it looks like," Silas said. "You're not lying." "You don't know me." "I know fear," Silas said. "I know shame. And I know the difference between guilt and injustice." He picked up the reins again. "You didn't do anything wrong. You just had the bad luck of saying no to the wrong man." Clara's breath came out in a shuddering exhale. She looked away, wiping at her face with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Silas nodded, started the wagon moving again. They rode in silence for another mile. Then Clara said, "What about you?" Silas glanced at her. "What about me?" "You said you know fear," she said. "And shame." He didn't answer right away. The prairie stretched out endlessly. The sky was heavy with clouds. "I was a cavalry scout," he said finally. "Spent 5 years tracking Sioux war parties through the Powder River country. Saw things I wish I hadn't. Did things I wish I could undo." He paused. "I don't sleep well. I don't trust easy. And sometimes I get angry for no reason and have to walk it off before I say something I'll regret." Clara looked at him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you were honest with me," Silas said. "Seems fair to return the favor." She nodded slowly. "So we're both carrying damage?" "Looks that way." "And you still want to marry me?" "I still want a partner," Silas said. "Someone who can work beside me. Someone who won't run when things get hard. He looked at her. You willing to do that? Clara's hands were still shaking, but her voice was steadier now. Yes. Then we'll make it work. The ranch came into view just as the sun broke through the clouds. It wasn't much. A main house, a barn, a corral, a few outbuildings. But it was solid, clean, cared for. Silas helped Clara down from the wagon. She stood in the yard, looking around, and for the first time since she'd stepped off the stagecoach, she wasn't crying. It's quiet, she said. Too quiet? No, she smiled faintly. It's perfect. Silas carried her trunk inside. The house was sparse but functional. A kitchen with a cast-iron stove. A main room with a table, 2 chairs, and a fireplace. A bedroom in the back. Everything was clean, but clearly lacked a woman's touch. I'll sleep in the barn until we're married, Silas said. You take the bedroom. Clara turned to him. When were you planning to marry? Preacher comes through on Sundays, Silas said. That's 6 days from now. But if you need more time, 6 days is fine, Clara said quickly. Then she hesitated. Unless you want more time. Silas shook his head. 6 days works. She nodded, looked around the room again. What do you need from me? I mean, what should I do here? Can you cook? Badly, Clara admitted. But I can learn. Can you ride? I've never been on a horse. Silas almost smiled. We'll fix that. What can you do? Clara straightened her shoulders. I can sew. I can read and write. I can keep accounts. I can organize chaos into something functional. She paused. And I can work. Long hours, hard work. I'm not afraid of it. Good, Silas said, because this ranch doesn't run on charm. She met his eyes. I don't have any charm left anyway. This time Silas did smile. Just a little. Then we'll get along fine. The first 3 days were an education in survival. Clara burned the first 2 meals she attempted. Silas ate them without complaint, then showed her how to manage the heat on the stove. She scorched her hand on the cast iron. He wrapped it in clean cloth and taught her to use a towel as a barrier. He took her out to the corral and introduced her to a gentle mare named Patience. She's older, Silas said. Calm. Won't spook easy. Clara looked at the horse like it was a dragon. She's enormous. She's a horse. I've never... I know, Silas said. That's why we're starting now. He helped her into the saddle. Clara gripped the reins so hard her knuckles went white. Breathe, Silas said. I'm breathing. You're holding your breath. Clara exhaled shakily. The horse shifted beneath her. She gasped. Easy, Silas said. She's just adjusting. You're safe. He walked beside her, leading Patience in slow circles around the corral. Clara's fear gradually eased into focus. By the end of the hour, she was guiding the horse herself, cautiously but competently. You're a natural, Silas said. Clara laughed, a real laugh, the first he'd heard from her. You're a terrible liar. I don't lie. Then you're very kind. I'm practical, Silas corrected. You learn fast. That's worth noting. In the evenings, they sat at the table and talked. Silas showed her his account books, a chaotic mess of numbers, receipts, and half-finished calculations. Clara frowned. This is creative. It's a disaster, Silas said flatly. I can fix it. Can you? She nodded. Give me 2 days. She worked by lamplight, reorganizing everything into clean columns and legible notes. Silas watched her sometimes, hunched over the books with fierce concentration, and thought that maybe he'd gotten more than he'd bargained for. On the fourth day, a rider came to the ranch. Silas was in the barn when he heard the hoofbeats. He stepped outside, hand instinctively moving toward the rifle leaning against the doorframe. The rider was a lean man in his 50s, well-dressed, riding an expensive horse. He dismounted smoothly and tipped his hat. "Silas Boone?" "That's right." The man extended a hand. "Marcus Pemberton. I run the mercantile in Dust River. Just wanted to welcome you and your new bride to the community." Silas shook his hand warily. "Appreciate that." Pemberton's eyes flicked toward the house. "I understand she arrived a few days ago. From St. Louis, I hear." Silas's grip tightened slightly. "News travels fast." "Small town," Pemberton said with a thin smile. "People talk, especially when something interesting happens." He paused. "Whitfield, wasn't it? Clara Whitfield?" Silas felt ice slide down his spine. "You know the name?" "I travel to St. Louis twice a year for inventory," Pemberton said. "Heard some talk about a young woman who got herself into trouble with a factory owner's son. Made quite a scandal." He tilted his head. "Same name, same age from what I could tell. Quite a coincidence, don't you think?" Silas took a step forward. His voice dropped. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Pemberton raised his hands. Nothing. Just making conversation. But you know how people are. Once word gets around," he shrugged. "Well, reputations matter, even out here." "Get off my property," Silas said. Pemberton's smile faded. "I'm just trying to—" "Now!" The merchant mounted his horse without another word. But as he rode away, he called back, "See you at church on Sunday, Boone. Should be an interesting service." Silas stood in the yard, fists clenched, watching until Pemberton disappeared over the rise. Clara stepped out of the house. "Who is that?" Silas turned. She looked pale. "Someone who's about to make our lives difficult," he said. "He knows," Clara whispered. "Doesn't he?" Silas nodded slowly. Clara's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I should never have come here. I've ruined everything." "Stop," Silas said sharply. She froze. He crossed the yard in 3 strides, stood in front of her. "Listen to me. You didn't ruin anything. That man, and men like him, they thrive on tearing people down. It makes them feel important." He paused. "But they don't get to decide your worth. And they sure as hell don't get to decide mine." "But if the town—" "Let them talk," Silas said. "We'll handle it." "How?" He met her eyes. "Together." On Sunday, they rode into Dust River for the church service. Clara wore her best dress, still worn, but clean and pressed. Her hands were shaking again. Silas noticed, but didn't comment. He helped her down from the wagon and offered his arm. "Stay close," he said quietly. They walked into the church. Every head turned. The whispers started immediately, a low, vicious hum that filled the space like wasps in a jar. Clara felt it crawling over her skin. She wanted to run, wanted to disappear. But Silas's arm was steady beneath her hand, and he didn't slow down. They sat in the 3rd pew. The preacher began the service. Halfway through, Marcus Pemberton stood up. "Preacher," he said loudly, "I have a concern." The room went silent. The preacher, an older man named Reverend Cole, frowned. "This is a worship service, Marcus. Concerns can wait." "This one can't," Pemberton said. He turned to face the congregation. "We have a newcomer among us, Mrs. Clara Boone, or should I say, Clara Whitfield." Gasps rippled through the pews. Clara felt her chest tighten. The air was closing in. Pemberton continued. "In St. Louis, this woman was involved in a scandal. Accusations of impropriety with a wealthy man's son. She fled rather than face the consequences. "That's a lie," Clara said. Her voice was barely audible. "Is it?" Pemberton smiled coldly. "Then why did you run?" Clara tried to speak. Couldn't. The room was spinning. Silas stood. The movement was sudden enough that several people flinched. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. "She came here with honesty," Silas said. His voice cut through the room like a blade. "She told me everything before I ever asked. Every detail. Every accusation." He looked at Pemberton. "And I believed her. Because, unlike you, I can tell the difference between truth and slander." Pemberton's smile wavered. "You're letting emotion cloud your judgment, Boone." "No," Silas said. "I'm letting facts guide it. A wealthy man's son wanted something he couldn't have, so he destroyed her reputation to punish her for saying no." He turned to face the congregation. "That's not scandal. That's cruelty. And if any of you can't see the difference, then you're part of the problem." The silence was absolute. Silas looked directly at Clara. "She's my wife, and if any man in this room questions her character, he questions mine." Reverend Cole stood slowly. "Silas is right. Gossip has no place in this church, and neither does judgment without evidence." He looked at Pemberton. "Sit down, Marcus." Pemberton sat. Clara couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Someone had defended her, publicly, without hesitation. Silas sat back down beside her. Under the pew, he took her hand. She squeezed it so hard her fingers ached. After the service, people approached cautiously. Some offered quiet words of welcome. Others avoided eye contact entirely. But no one else challenged her. On the ride home, Clara finally spoke. "Thank you." Silas glanced at her. "For what?" "For standing up for me. For not letting them—" Her voice broke. "No one's ever done that before." "They should have," Silas said simply. She looked at him, this quiet, scarred man who'd offered her safety when she had nothing left, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of trust. And out here, that was worth more than gold. The first snow came 3 days after the church incident. Clara woke to find frost covering the windows and Silas already gone from the house. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside. He was in the corral, working with a young stallion that clearly didn't want to be worked with. "Easy," Silas said. The horse reared. "Easy now." Clara watched him move, patient, steady, waiting for the animal to settle rather than forcing it. The same way he'd waited for her to speak on the wagon ride. The same way he'd stood beside her in church without demanding gratitude. The horse finally calmed. Silas glanced toward the house and saw her watching. "You're up early," he called. "So are you." "Stock doesn't care about sleep schedules." He led the horse toward the barn. "You planning to stand there all morning, or you want to learn something useful?" Clara crossed the yard. "What kind of useful?" "The kind that keeps you alive when I'm not around." He taught her how to feed the horses, how to check their hooves for stones, how to read their moods by watching their ears. She asked questions constantly. He answered everyone without impatience. "Why does this one keep backing away from me?" Clara asked, gesturing at a sorrel mare. "She was mistreated before I bought her," Silas said. "Doesn't trust women. Previous owner's wife used to hit her with a crop." Clara's face hardened. "That's cruel." "That's common." Silas stroked the mare's neck. "Takes time to undo that kind of damage, but it can be done. You just have to be consistent. Show up every day. Prove you're different." Clara looked at him. Are we still talking about horses? Silas met her eyes. Maybe. She reached out slowly toward the mare. The horse flinched, but didn't bolt. Clara kept her hands steady, moving inch by inch until her fingers touched the warm neck. Good, Silas said quietly. Now don't move too fast. I won't. They worked together until mid-morning. Then Silas said, We need to talk about the wedding. Clara's stomach tightened. What about it? It's in 4 days, Silas said. But if you're not ready, I'm ready, Clara said quickly. Then, softer, unless you're not. Silas shook his head. I made a commitment. I keep my commitments. He paused. But I need to know something. Are you marrying me because you want to, or because you have nowhere else to go? The question hit her like cold water. Clara opened her mouth, closed it. Try again. At first, she said slowly, it was because I had nowhere else. But now, she struggled to find words. Now it's because I think we might actually be able to build something real. Together. Not perfect, but honest. Silas nodded. That's good enough for me. Good enough? I don't believe in perfect, Silas said. I believe in people who show up and do the work. You've done that. So have I. That's more than most marriages start with. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. So, we're really doing this? Looks that way. I don't have a proper dress. Don't need one. People will talk. People always talk, Silas said. Let them. She smiled despite herself. You make it sound simple. It is simple, Silas said. It's just not easy. That afternoon, a wagon rolled up to the ranch. Silas tensed immediately. Clara noticed the way his hand moved toward his hip, where a pistol would have hung during his cavalry days. But the visitors weren't hostile. It was a middle-aged couple, the man stocky and weathered, the woman thin and sharp-eyed. Boone, the man called out. Got a minute? Silas relaxed slightly. Tom, didn't expect you. Tom Harrigan ran the neighboring ranch to the east. He climbed down from the wagon, and his wife, Margaret, followed. Heard you got married, Tom said. Wanted to meet the bride. Getting married, Silas corrected. Sunday. Margaret's eyes found Clara. You're the one from St. Louis. Clara straightened her spine. Yes, ma'am. Heard about the church incident, Margaret said. Then, to Clara's surprise, she smiled. Good for Silas. About time someone put Marcus Pemberton in his place. Clara blinked. You don't think... Think what? Margaret said. That you're some kind of scarlet woman? She snorted. I've known men like the one you described. They're everywhere. Rich, entitled, convinced the world owes them whatever they want. She looked at Silas. Your man here stood up for you in front of the whole town. That tells me everything I need to know about both of you. Tom nodded. We came to offer help. Winter's coming hard. You're going to need extra hands for the stock. We can spare 2 men for a few weeks. No charge. Call it a wedding present. Silas stared at him. Tom, I can't. You can, Tom said. And you will. Because next spring, when I need help with calving, you're going to return the favor. That's how it works out here. Silas shook his hand slowly. Appreciated. Margaret turned to Clara. You know how to preserve meat? No, ma'am. Then you're coming to my house tomorrow. I'll teach you. Can't have you starving when the snows come heavy. She looked at Silas. That all right with you? That's Clara's decision, Silas said. Both women looked at him with surprise. I'd like to learn, Clara said. Margaret smiled. Good. I'll send Tom to fetch you at dawn." After they left, Clara said, "They were kind." "Some people are," Silas said. "You sound surprised." "I am, a little." He looked at her. "Most folks out here keep to themselves. The Harrigans don't. They see someone struggling and they step in." He paused. "I'm not good at accepting help." "Neither am I," Clara said. "Then we'll have to learn together." The next morning, Clara rode to the Harrigan ranch with Tom in awkward silence. But when they arrived, Margaret pulled her into the kitchen with brisk efficiency and proceeded to teach her everything she'd never learned in a city boarding house. "Salt is your friend," Margaret said, elbow deep in a basin of brine. "Sugar and smoke, too. You get those three right, you can keep meat through the worst winter." She glanced at Clara. "How much do you know about surviving out here?" "Nothing," Clara admitted. "At least you're honest." Margaret handed her a knife. "Start cutting that venison into strips, thin as you can." They worked in silence for a while. Then Margaret said, "Silas Boone is a good man." "I'm learning that." "He's also a damaged man," Margaret continued. "You know about his time in the cavalry?" "A little." "He saw things no person should see," Margaret said quietly. "Lost friends, did things he can't undo. When he came back, he was different, quieter, more careful with people." She looked at Clara directly. "He's not going to be easy to live with. Some days he'll shut down completely. Some days he'll wake up in the middle of the night, ready to fight ghosts. You prepared for that?" Clara's hands stilled on the knife. "I don't know." "Fair answer," Margaret resumed working. "But here's what I'll tell you. A man who's been through hell and still chooses kindness, that's rare. Most men let the darkness win. Silas didn't. He fights it every day. Sometimes he loses, but he keeps fighting." She paused. "If you're going to be his wife, you need to know that. And you need to decide if you're strong enough to fight beside him." "What if I'm not?" Clara whispered. "Then you leave before the wedding," Margaret said bluntly. "Better that than pretending. Silas deserves honesty. So do you." Clara thought about the way Silas had stood in that church, the way he'd looked at her, not with pity, but with recognition. Two broken people trying to build something whole. "I'm not leaving," Clara said. Margaret smiled. "Good." By the time Tom drove Clara back to the ranch that evening, she had jars of preserved meat, a head full of new knowledge, and something she hadn't felt in months, a sense of belonging. Silas was waiting in the yard when they arrived. "Learn anything?" he asked. "Everything," Clara said. She showed him the jars. "Margaret says this will last us through February if we're careful." Silas took one of the jars, examining it. "She's generous." "She said you saved Tom's cattle from rustlers 3 years ago, that you tracked the thieves for 2 days without sleep and got every animal back." Clara tilted her head. "You didn't mention that." "Didn't seem relevant." "It's relevant to them." Silas shrugged. "That's what neighbors do." Clara studied him in the fading light. This man who minimized his own courage, who stood up for others but couldn't accept gratitude, who carried his past like a physical weight but refused to let it crush him. "You're a strange man, Silas Boone," she said. "That a problem?" "No," Clara said softly. "It's not." 2 days before the wedding, the temperature dropped 20 degrees overnight. Clara woke to Silas shaking her shoulder roughly. "Get dressed," he said. "Now." She sat up, confused. "What's wrong?" "Storm coming, big one. We need to move the stock to the winter shelter before it hits." They worked in frantic tandem. Clara had never moved cattle before, but Silas didn't have time to teach her gently. He put her on patience and gave her simple instructions. Ride behind them, wave your arms, make noise. They'll move forward. Don't let any break away from the herd. What if they do? Then you go get them. The first flakes started falling as they drove the cattle toward the shelter. Clara's fingers went numb inside her gloves. Her face burned with cold. But she kept riding, kept shouting, kept pushing the animals forward. One young steer broke away, terrified by the wind. Clara didn't think, she just reacted. Patience seemed to understand before Clara even gave the command. The horse surged forward, cutting the steer off, forcing it back toward the herd. Silas saw it happen, nodded his approval. By the time they got the last animal into shelter, the snow was falling so thick Clara could barely see 10 feet ahead. They stumbled into the house together, half frozen. Silas built up the fire, while Clara stripped off her wet outer layers with shaking hands. "You did well," Silas said. "I was terrified." "But you didn't freeze. You acted." He poured hot coffee from the pot on the stove. "That's what matters out here. Thinking is good, but acting is better." Clara wrapped her hands around the mug. "How long will the storm last?" "Day, maybe 2. "And if it lasts longer?" "Then we make do." The storm lasted 3 days. They were trapped inside together, with nothing to do but talk. At first, it was practical things. Inventory, repairs needed, plans for spring. But on the second day, the conversation shifted. "Tell me about your family," Clara said. Silas was quiet for a long moment. "Father was a trapper, died when I was 12. Mother remarried a man who didn't want another man's child around. I left at 14. Joined the cavalry at 16 by lying about my age." "You've been alone a long time." "Alone is safer than disappointing people." Clara set down her mending. "Do you think I'll disappoint you?" Silas looked at her. "No." "How can you be sure?" "Because you're honest about your flaws," Silas said. "People who pretend to be perfect are the ones who let you down. People who admit their damage, they're the ones who show up when it matters." "Is that why you defended me? In the church?" "I defended you because it was right," Silas said. "And because I'm tired of watching powerful people destroy the powerless." His jaw tightened. "I spent 5 years following orders that got good men killed. I watched officers cover their mistakes by blaming scouts. I saw enough injustice to last 3 lifetimes." He paused. "I won't participate in it anymore, not even by staying silent." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "You could have married someone without complications. Someone the town would have accepted immediately." "I don't want easy acceptance," Silas said. "I want someone real." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in the bedroom, listening to the wind howl outside, thinking about the wedding 2 days away, about becoming someone's wife, about trusting a man after everything she'd been through. She heard movement in the main room. Footsteps, then silence. She got up quietly and peered through the doorway. Silas was standing by the window, rifle in hand, staring out into the darkness. "Silas?" He turned sharply. His eyes were distant, unfocused. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." Clara stepped closer. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Don't lie to me." He exhaled slowly, set the rifle down. "Old habits. I wake up sometimes thinking I'm back in Sioux country. Takes a minute to remember where I am." "Every night?" "Most nights." He rubbed his face. Sometimes I hear things that aren't there, see movement in shadows. Margaret told you I was damaged. She wasn't exaggerating. Clara moved to stand beside him. Everyone's damaged, Silas. We just hide it in different ways. Yours doesn't wake you with a rifle in your hands. No, Clara said. Mine wakes me with nightmares about being cornered in alleys, about hands I couldn't escape, about screaming and no one coming to help. She looked at him. We're both carrying things we can't put down, but maybe we don't have to carry them alone. Silas was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'm afraid I'll hurt you. Not intentionally, but in one of those moments when I don't know where I am. When the past feels more real than the present. Then we'll figure it out together, Clara said. You'll tell me what you need, I'll tell you what I need, and we'll be honest, even when it's hard. That simple? No, Clara said, but it's possible. The storm broke on the morning of the wedding. Silas and Clara rode into Dust River together under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The town was quiet. Most people were still digging out from the snow. Reverend Cole met them at the church door. Ready? He asked. Silas looked at Clara. Are we? She nodded. We are. The service was brief. No guests, no flowers. Just two people making promises they intended to keep. When Reverend Cole said, You may kiss your bride, Silas hesitated. Clara reached up and kissed him first. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't romantic. It was a promise, sealed with intention. They rode back to the ranch as husband and wife. The land stretched out white and endless. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. That night they sat by the fire as a married couple. I don't know how to be a husband, Silas said suddenly. I don't know how to be a wife, Clara said. Then we'll learn together. And when we fail, then we'll fail together, Silas said, and we'll get up and try again. Clara leaned against his shoulder. He didn't pull away. Outside, the wind picked up again. But inside, something fragile and real was beginning to grow. Something that might, eventually, be called home. The first week of marriage was harder than either of them expected. Not because they fought. They didn't. But because living with another person meant exposing every flaw, every habit, every crack in the armor they'd both built to survive alone. Silas woke at 4 a.m. every day, moving through the house like a ghost. Clara was a light sleeper. Every creak of the floorboards jolted her awake. By the third morning, she was exhausted. Can you try to be quieter? She asked at breakfast. Silas looked up from his coffee. I'm already being quiet. You're walking like you're trying to sneak past enemy lines. Old habit. Well, it's a loud habit, Clara said. Then, softer. I'm not complaining. I'm just tired. Silas was quiet for a moment. I'll wear socks. Thank you. It was a small thing, but it mattered. Clara had her own irritating habits. She reorganized everything. The pantry, the tool shed, the barn. Silas would reach for something and find it had been moved. Why is my rope in a different place? He asked one afternoon. Because it makes more sense over there, Clara said, with the other rope. I knew where it was before. It was chaos before. It was my chaos. Clara stopped, turned to face him. Do you want me to put it back? Silas exhaled. No, you're right. It does make more sense. He paused. But maybe ask before you move my things? Fair enough. They were learning each other, step by painful step. 2 weeks after the wedding, the real cold arrived. The temperature dropped so low that water froze in the buckets overnight. Silas spent hours each day breaking ice, hauling feed, checking stock. Clara learned to split wood with an axe that felt twice her weight. Her hands blistered, then calloused, then became strong. One morning, she woke to find Silas hadn't come back from the barn. She pulled on her coat and boots and went looking. She found him in the corral, favoring his left side, breathing hard. "What happened?" "Bull got spooked," Silas said through gritted teeth. "Caught me with his horn." Clara's heart dropped. "How bad?" "Bad enough." He tried to straighten and gasped. "Might have cracked a rib." "We need to get you to a doctor." "Nearest doctor is 2 days' ride," Silas said. "And I can't ride." Clara felt panic rising. Then she forced it down. Panic didn't help anyone. "Can you walk to the house?" Slowly. She got under his shoulder, taking as much of his weight as she could. They made it to the house in agonizing increments. Once inside, she helped him onto the bed. "What do you need?" Clara asked. "Whiskey. And bandages. Tight ones," he winced. "If the rib is cracked, wrapping it will help." Clara found the supplies with shaking hands. She'd never done this before. Never wrapped an injury. Never been responsible for someone's physical survival. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said. "I'll talk you through it," Silas said. "But it's going to hurt. Both of us." She wrapped his ribs as carefully as she could. Silas didn't cry out, but she could see the pain etched into every line of his face. When she finished, he was pale and sweating. "Good," he managed. "That's good." "You need to rest." "I need to check the stock." "I'll check the stock," Clara said. Silas stared at her. "Clara, I know how to feed them. I know how to check for injuries. I know how to break ice." She straightened her shoulders. "And I know you can't do it right now, so I will." "You can't manage the whole ranch alone." "Then I'll get help." Clara was already pulling her coat back on. "Tom Harrigan offered men. I'm taking him up on it." She rode to the Harrigan ranch before she could talk herself out of it. Margaret answered the door. "Clara? What's wrong?" "Silas is hurt. Cracked rib, maybe worse. I need help with the stock." Margaret didn't hesitate. "Tom, get the boys!" She turned back to Clara. "We're coming, all of us." Within an hour, 2 of Tom's ranch hands were at the Boone property, handling the heavy work. Clara supervised, trying to remember everything Silas had taught her. The men were respectful, but skeptical at first. A city woman giving orders didn't inspire confidence. Then one of them, a young cowhand named Jesse, started to do something wrong with the feed. "Not like that," Clara said sharply. "You'll founder the horses if you give them cold grain after they've been working. Warm it first." Jesse blinked. "Yes, ma'am." After that, they listened. Clara spent the next week managing the ranch while Silas healed. She woke before dawn, worked until her body screamed, fell into bed exhausted, and got up the next morning to do it again. Silas watched from the window when he could stand. "She's tougher than she looks," Tom said, checking on him one afternoon. "She's tougher than anyone looks," Silas said quietly. On the 8th day, Silas tried to get out of bed and collapsed. Clara found him on the floor, clutching his side, face gray. "What were you thinking?" she demanded. "That I was tired of being useless." "You're not useless. You're injured. There's a difference." She helped him back onto the bed. "And if you tear something trying to prove you're invincible, you'll be useless for months instead of weeks." "I hate this," Silas said. His voice was raw. "I hate needing help. I hate watching you do everything while you heal," Clara interrupted. "That's not weakness. That's survival." "It feels like weakness." Clara sat on the edge of the bed. "You stood up for me when I had nothing. You gave me safety when I was broken. You think I won't do the same for you?" Silas looked at her. Really looked at her. This isn't what you signed up for. No, Clara said. It's better, because it's real. This is what marriage actually is, not some romantic fantasy. It's showing up when things are hard. It's carrying each other when one of us can't walk. She paused. I can do this, Silas. Let me. He exhaled slowly. All right. All right? I'll rest. You manage. But you come to me with questions, and you tell me if it gets too heavy. Deal. The days blurred together. Clara negotiated with suppliers for winter feed. She tracked expenses in the account books. She rode fence lines in freezing wind to check for damage. She learned which animals needed extra attention and which ones could fend for themselves. And slowly, Silas healed. On the 15th day, he made it to the kitchen table without help. You're moving better, Clara said. Still hurts, but it's manageable. He looked at the account books spread across the table. How bad is it? Not as bad as you think, Clara said. We spent more on feed than expected, but Tom gave us a discount, and I sold 3 horses to a passing freight company. Silas's eyebrows rose. You sold horses? You said they were ready. I saw the opportunity. I took it. She showed him the ledger. Made a decent profit, too. Silas studied the numbers, then looked at her. You're good at this. I'm learning. No, Silas said. You're good at this. Better than I am, actually. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. Don't sell yourself short. I'm not. I'm good at ranching. You're good at business. That's useful. He paused. More than useful. It's essential. That night, after Clara had gone to bed, Silas sat alone in the main room. He was healing. The ranch was surviving. His wife was stronger than he'd ever imagined. But the nightmares were getting worse. He'd wake in the dark, heart pounding, certain there were men outside waiting to kill him. He'd reach for weapons that weren't there, stand at windows for hours, watching for threats that didn't exist. He hadn't told Clara. Didn't know how. 2 nights later, Clara woke to find him gone from the house entirely. She pulled on her coat and found him in the barn, fully dressed, rifle across his lap, staring at nothing. Silas? He jerked, turned the rifle toward her before recognition hit. Clara froze. Silas lowered the weapon immediately. God, I'm sorry, I didn't... It's all right, Clara said carefully. But you need to talk to me. Right now. Silas set the rifle down with shaking hands. I thought I heard something. Men approaching. I came out here to defend the ranch. He laughed bitterly. There's no one out there. There never is. But my mind can't tell the difference anymore. Clara moved closer, slowly. How often does this happen? 3, 4 times a week? And you haven't said anything? What was I supposed to say? Silas's voice broke. That I'm losing my mind? That I can't tell reality from memory half the time? You married a man, Clara. Not a broken soldier who wakes up ready to fight ghosts. I married you, Clara said. All of you. Including the parts that are still fighting wars that ended years ago. She sat down beside him in the hay. You don't have to hide this from me. You shouldn't have to deal with this. And you shouldn't have to deal with it alone, Clara said. So here's what we're going to do. When this happens, you wake me. You tell me what you're feeling, and we handle it together. What if I hurt you in one of those moments? Then we make rules, Clara said. You don't keep weapons in the bedroom. You wake me before you go outside. We establish signals so I know when you're not fully present. She took his hand. This is fixable, Silas. Not curable, maybe, but manageable. You sound certain. I am, Clara said, because you're already doing the hard part. You're aware of it. You're trying to control it. That's more than most men would do. She paused. And because I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid for you. There's a difference. Silas looked at their joined hands. I don't deserve you. You stood in a church and claimed me when everyone wanted me gone, Clara said. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You trusted me to run this ranch when you couldn't. She met his eyes. Don't tell me what you deserve. Tell me what you need. Silas's throat worked. I need you to be patient with me. Done. I need you to tell me when I'm scaring you. I will. And I need you to know that I'm trying. Every day, even when it doesn't look like it. I already know that, Clara said softly. They sat in the barn until dawn, talking about things Silas had never told anyone. The friends he'd lost. The orders he'd followed that got men killed. The guilt that sat in his chest like a stone. Clara listened without judgment, without trying to fix anything, without offering empty comfort. When the sun finally rose, Silas said, Thank you. For what? For not running. I told you, Clara said. I don't run anymore. The next crisis came a week later. A blizzard hit with no warning. Clara and Silas were in the barn when the wind picked up so violently it tore shingles off the roof. We need to get the animals into the inner shelter, Silas shouted over the wind. They worked frantically, moving livestock into the reinforced section of the barn. The temperature was dropping by the minute. Snow came down so thick, Clara couldn't see her own hands. How many more? She yelled. 4 horses, Silas called back. In the far corral. Clara fought her way through the storm. The horses were panicking, running in circles. She managed to grab the lead mare's halter. Come on, she shouted. Move! The mare resisted. Clara pulled harder. The other horses followed reluctantly. They were halfway to the barn when Clara's foot hit a patch of ice. She went down hard. The horses scattered. Silas was there in seconds, pulling her up. You hurt? No, get the horses! They managed to round up 3 of them, but the 4th, a young stallion, bolted into the storm. Leave him, Clara shouted. You'll get lost. He'll die out there. Silas started after the horse. Clara grabbed his arm. And you'll die trying to save him. Silas, stop! He turned on her, eyes wild. I can get him. You can't, Clara yelled. And I won't lose you for a horse. I won't. Silas froze, stared at her. She was crying, not from fear, from rage, from the sudden, overwhelming realization that she couldn't bear the thought of losing him. Please, she said, please don't go out there. Silas looked at the storm, then back at her. He let the horse go. They got into the barn together, sealed the doors, huddled with the animals as the blizzard raged outside. I'm sorry, Silas said after a long silence. For what? For almost doing something stupid. Clara leaned against him. You were trying to save an animal. That's not stupid, it's just... She stopped. It's just that I need you more than we need that horse. Silas wrapped an arm around her. I need you too. They stayed in the barn for 2 days while the storm raged, rationed the food they had, kept the animals calm, talked about everything and nothing. On the 2nd night, Silas said, I wasn't planning on this. On what? Caring about you. He paused. I thought this would be practical, a partnership. I didn't think I'd... He struggled for words. I didn't think I'd fall in love. Clara's breath caught. "Are you?" "Falling in love?" Silas looked at her. "Yeah, I think I am." Clara felt tears sting her eyes. "Good, because I think I am too." "Even with all the nightmares and the broken parts?" "Especially with those," Clara said, "because they're part of who you are, and I choose all of you, not just the easy parts." Silas kissed her then, not out of obligation or performance, but because he wanted to, because she was real and present and choosing him despite everything. When they finally made it back to the house after the storm, they found the young stallion in the corral. He'd survived, found his way home on his own. "Stubborn animal," Silas muttered. Clara laughed. "Takes one to know one." That night they sat by the fire as husband and wife, but now as something more. Partners who'd been tested and hadn't broken. People who'd chosen each other. Not once, but over and over again. And whatever came next, they'd face it the way they'd faced everything else. Together. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought hope with it. The snow melted in rushing torrents. The prairie turned green overnight. Clara planted a garden behind the house, her hands deep in soil that smelled like possibility. Silas watched her from the corral, mending tack, and thought about how much had changed in 6 months. She'd arrived broken, terrified, unable to stop crying. Now she rode fence lines alone, negotiated contracts with suppliers, and ran the ranch business with more skill than he'd ever managed. "You're staring again," Clara called without looking up. "Just appreciating the view," Silas said. She glanced over her shoulder, dirt smudged across her cheek. "The view of me covered in mud?" "Especially that." She laughed. The sound still caught him off guard sometimes, made him realize how quiet his life had been before she came. That afternoon, riders approached the ranch. Silas recognized Mayor Thornton and 2 town council members. His instinct was to reach for a weapon. Old habits. But Clara touched his arm lightly. "Breathe," she said quietly. "They're probably not here to cause trouble." "Probably isn't definitely." "Then we'll handle whatever comes." Mayor Thornton dismounted, removing his hat. "Mr. and Mrs. Boone, hope we're not intruding." "Depends on what you want," Silas said. Thornton smiled slightly. "Direct as always. We're here with a proposal." He gestured to the other men. "The town council has been discussing opening a schoolhouse. Dust River's growing. We've got 15 children now who need proper education." "Good idea," Silas said. "What's that got to do with us?" "We need a teacher," one of the council members said. "Someone educated. Someone the community respects." He looked at Clara. "Mrs. Boone, we'd like to offer you the position." Clara's face went white. Silas stepped forward slightly. "Give us a minute to discuss it." "Of course," Thornton said. "We'll wait by the horses." Clara walked into the house without a word. Silas followed. Inside she was pacing, arms wrapped around herself. "I can't do it," she said. "Why not?" "Because—" she stopped. "Because what if someone finds out more about my past? What if parents don't want their children taught by a woman with a scandal attached to her name?" "Your scandal was a lie," Silas said. "That doesn't matter to some people." Clara's voice cracked. "I ran from St. Louis because no one would listen to the truth. What makes you think it'll be different here?" Silas crossed the room, took her hands. "Because you're not running anymore. You're standing. You proved yourself to this town. You survived a winter that would have broken most people. You ran this ranch when I couldn't. They're not asking you to teach out of pity. They're asking because you're qualified. But what if you ran once because no one stood beside you, Silas said. You don't run anymore. Not with me here. Not with the Harrigans supporting you. Not with a whole town that watched you prove yourself. He paused. This is your chance to build something that's yours. Not ours. Yours. Clara looked at him. You really think I can do this? I know you can. She took a shaky breath. All right. I'll do it. They walked back outside together. Clara's hands were trembling, but her voice was steady. I accept the position, she told Mayor Thornton. Thornton smiled. Excellent. School starts in 3 weeks. We'll have the building ready by then. He tipped his hat. Welcome to Dust River's future, Mrs. Boone. After they left, Clara sat on the porch steps, processing what she'd just agreed to. I'm terrified, she said. Good, Silas said. Means it matters. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Clara rode into town every other day to help prepare the schoolhouse. The building was small, just one room with a wood stove and rough-hewn benches, but it was solid. Margaret Harrigan helped her organize supplies. Other women in town donated books, slates, chalk. But not everyone was supportive. Marcus Pemberton made his opinion clear at the general store one afternoon. Seems risky, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Trusting our children's education to someone we barely know. Clara felt the familiar tightening in her chest. But before she could respond, Margaret spoke up. We know her well enough, Margaret said sharply. She's proven herself 10 times over. What have you proven lately, Marcus? Besides how to spread gossip like a bored washwoman. The store went silent. Pemberton's face reddened. I'm simply expressing concern. Then express it somewhere else, Margaret said. Preferably where decent people don't have to hear it. Pemberton left without buying anything. Clara exhaled slowly. Thank you. Don't thank me, Margaret said. Just prove him wrong by being the best teacher these children have ever had. I'll try. You'll succeed, Margaret said firmly. And I'll be there on the first day to make sure everyone knows it. The night before school started, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, reviewing lesson plans she'd written and rewritten a dozen times. Silas found her there at 2 a.m. You need rest, he said. I need to be perfect tomorrow. You need to be yourself tomorrow, Silas corrected. He sat across from her. These are children, Clara. They don't need perfection. They need someone who cares, someone who shows up, someone who treats them with respect. He paused. You already know how to do all of that. What if I freeze? What if I forget everything I planned? Then you improvise, Silas said. You've been improvising since the day you arrived. This is no different. Clara looked at her notes, then at him. Will you come? To the first day? You want me there? I need you there, Clara said. Just knowing you're in the room will help. Then I'll be there. The schoolhouse was packed when they arrived the next morning. 15 children sat on benches, ranging from age 6 to 14. Their parents lined the walls, watching with expressions that ranged from hopeful to skeptical. Clara saw Pemberton in the back corner, arms crossed, face set. She took a breath, walked to the front of the room. Good morning, she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. My name is Mrs. Boone, and I'm honored to be your teacher. The children stared at her. She'd planned an elaborate introduction, a speech about education and opportunity and the future. But looking at their faces, some eager, some frightened, some already bored, She abandoned the plan.
"How many of you can read?" she asked.
5 hands went up. "How many want to learn?" All 15 hands rose. Clara smiled. "Then let's start there." She spent the morning teaching the alphabet to the youngest children, while the older ones worked on arithmetic. She moved between groups, answering questions, offering encouragement. One little girl couldn't form her letters correctly and started crying. Clara knelt beside her. "What's your name?" "Annie," the girl whispered. "Annie, I couldn't write my letters properly when I first learned either. My hand kept cramping. Want to know what helped?" Annie nodded. "Taking breaks. Writing one letter, then shaking out your hand, then writing another." Clara demonstrated. "Try it." Annie tried. Her letters were still shaky, but better. "Perfect," Clara said. "Now do that 10 more times, and by tomorrow, you'll be even better." Annie beamed. By noon, the parents were leaving. Most looked satisfied. Some even smiled at Clara. Pemberton left without comment, but his expression was slightly less hostile. Silas waited until everyone had gone. Then he walked to the front of the room where Clara was cleaning slates. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Exhausted, exhilarated, terrified, proud." She looked at him. "All of it at once." "You were incredible," Silas said. "Those children listened to you like you'd been teaching for years." "I made so many mistakes." "And you recovered from every one," Silas said. "That's what teaching is. That's what life is. Making mistakes and recovering." Clara set down the slate. "Thank you for being here." "Always." 3 weeks into the school term, trouble arrived in the form of a letter. Silas brought it home from town. Clara recognized the handwriting immediately. Her stomach dropped. "It's from my former employer," she said, "in St. Louis." "You don't have to read it," Silas said. But Clara opened it anyway. Her hand shook as she read. The letter was brief. Her former employer's son, the man who'd destroyed her reputation, had died in a carriage accident. In his personal effects, they'd found a diary. A confession, really. He'd written about his obsession with Clara, about spreading false rumors when she rejected him, about bribing witnesses to support his story. The factory owner was writing to apologize, to offer her former position back, to clear her name publicly. Clara read the letter twice, then handed it to Silas. He read it in silence. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," Clara whispered. "Part of me wants to send copies to every person in St. Louis who turned their back on me. Part of me wants to burn it and never think about it again." "Those aren't the only options," Silas said. "What else is there?" "You could accept the apology without going back," Silas said. "You could acknowledge that your name has been cleared without needing their validation anymore." He paused. "You're not the same person who left St. Louis. You've built a life here, a real one. That man's confession doesn't change what you've already proven." Clara felt tears sliding down her face. "I spent months wishing someone would vindicate me. Now that it's happened, I realize I don't need it anymore." "Because you vindicated yourself," Silas said. "Every day you teach those children. Every day you walk through town with your head up. Every day you choose to stay and build instead of running." He took her hands. "That's worth more than any letter." Clara nodded. "I need to tell the children. Some of them might hear about this from their parents." "Then we tell them together." The next day, Clara stood in front of her class and told them the truth. She explained that she'd been falsely accused of something she didn't do, that she'd left her old life because people believed lies instead of listening to her, that she'd come to Montana to start over. And now, she said, the truth has come out. The person who lied about me confessed before he died. My name has been cleared in St. Louis. The older children understood immediately. The younger ones looked confused. A boy named Thomas raised his hand. Does that mean you're leaving? Clara's throat tightened. No, this is my home now. Good, Thomas said, because you're the best teacher we've ever had. I'm the only teacher you've ever had, Clara said. Still the best, another child said. Clara had to turn away to hide her tears. That evening, news of the letter spread through Dust River. Some people apologized for doubting her. Others acted like they'd always believed in her innocence. Pemberton said nothing, but he stopped attending church on Sundays when Clara was there. Margaret Harrigan brought a pie to the ranch the next day. Heard about the vindication, she said. Figured you'd want to celebrate. I'm not sure I feel like celebrating, Clara admitted. Why not? Because it took someone dying for the truth to matter, Clara said bitterly. Because if he hadn't confessed, I'd still be the woman everyone suspected. My innocence was always real, but it only became valid when a man admitted his guilt. She stopped. That doesn't feel like victory. It feels like proof that women's words don't count unless a man backs them up. Margaret was quiet for a moment. You're right. That's exactly what it is. She cut 2 slices of pie. But here's what matters now. You don't need his confession to know your own worth, and neither do the people who matter. Those children in that schoolhouse, they know who you are because of what you do, not because of what some dead man wrote in a diary. I just wish it hadn't taken this long, Clara said. Truth usually does, Margaret said. But it came, and now you get to decide what to do with it. Clara thought about that as she taught the next day, about how much power she'd given to other people's opinions, about how much energy she'd wasted wanting validation from people who'd never deserved her respect in the first place. That afternoon, she wrote a response to the factory owner. She thanked him for the letter, acknowledged the apology, and declined the offer to return to St. Louis. I've built a new life, she wrote, one based on my own merits, not on other people's opinions. I don't need my old position back. I have a better one now. She sealed the letter and gave it to Silas to mail. Feel better? He asked. I feel free, Clara said. 2 months later, the town council approached Clara with another proposal. They wanted to expand the school, build a second room, add more children from neighboring ranches. They offered her a raise and asked if she'd be willing to train a second teacher. Clara agreed immediately. Silas watched her confidence grow daily. She spoke at town council meetings now, organized fundraisers for school supplies, became someone people turned to for advice and leadership. One night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Silas said, You know you've become the most respected woman in Dust River. Clara laughed. That's an exaggeration. It's not, Silas said. People look up to you. They trust you. They ask your opinion on education to business to how to handle disputes. He paused. You're not just surviving anymore. You're leading. Clara was quiet for a long moment. I never wanted to lead. I just wanted to be left alone. Sometimes the people who don't want power are the ones who should have it, Silas said. She leaned against his shoulder. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have, Silas said. I just gave you a safe place to land. You did everything else yourself. We did it together, Clara corrected. That's different. Silas kissed the top of her head. Yeah, it is. That night, Clara dreamed of St. Louis for the first time in months. But instead of the nightmare version, being chased, accused, cornered. She dreamed of walking through the city as a visitor, observing it with detachment, seeing it as a place she'd once been, not a place that defined her. When she woke, Silas was already up, making coffee. "You slept well," he said.
"I did," Clara said, surprised. "No nightmares."
"Those come less often now," Silas said. "For both of us." Clara realized he was right. His episodes had decreased. Her anxiety had faded. They'd both been healing without realizing it. "We're going to be all right," she said softly. Silas smiled. "We already are." The second year of their marriage brought changes neither of them anticipated. The school expanded to 2 rooms. Clara trained a young woman named Sarah Mitchell to teach the younger children, while she focused on the older students. The ranch prospered under their combined management. Silas handled the livestock and land. Clara managed the finances and contracts. Together, they'd built something that worked. But prosperity brought new problems. A railroad company announced plans to run a line through Montana territory. Land values exploded overnight. Speculators descended on Dust River like locusts, offering cash for property, pushing out families who'd been there for generations. Silas came home one evening with tension written across his face. "They made me an offer," he said. Clara looked up from grading papers. "Who did?" "Montana Pacific Railroad. They want to buy the ranch. All of it." He tossed a letter onto the table, offering 3 times what the land is worth. Clara picked up the letter, read it twice. "That's a fortune." "It is." "But you don't want to sell." "This is our home," Silas said. "I built it from nothing. We survived here. We built our life here." He paused. "But that's a lot of money, Clara. Enough to buy land anywhere. Start over somewhere easier, somewhere without harsh winters and constant work." Clara set the letter down carefully. "Do you want easier?" Silas met her eyes. "No, but I want you to have a choice. You didn't choose this life. You chose survival. Now you have options. We have options." "We chose each other," Clara said. "Everything else came after that." She stood. "This ranch isn't just land, Silas. It's proof that we didn't give up. It's where I stopped running, where you learned to sleep through the night, where we became real." She paused. "I don't want to sell that, not for any amount of money." Silas exhaled slowly. "Then we don't sell." "That simple?" "That's simple." But the railroad didn't take no for an answer. Over the next month, representatives showed up repeatedly. Each time, the offer increased. Each time, Silas refused. The visits became more aggressive. Veiled threats about eminent domain, suggestions that accidents happened to people who stood in the way of progress. Clara watched Silas's stress mount. His nightmares returned with force. She'd wake to find him pacing, checking windows, gripping weapons that weren't there anymore. "We could fight them legally," Clara said one night. "Legal fights cost money," Silas said. "Money we don't have." "Then we find another way." "What other way? They're a railroad company. We're 2 people on a ranch." Clara thought about that, about power and leverage, about what she'd learned in a year and a half of teaching and organizing and proving herself. "We're not alone," she said. "The Harrigans face the same pressure. So does every rancher in the territory. If we organize—" "Ranchers don't organize," Silas said. "We're too independent, too stubborn." "Then maybe it's time to change that," Clara said. She called a meeting at the schoolhouse 3 days later. 30 ranchers showed up,
Most were skeptical.
A few were openly hostile to the idea of a woman leading the discussion, but they came because the railroad was threatening everyone. Clara stood at the front of the room, the same place she stood when teaching children. But this audience was harder to manage. "The railroad wants our land," she began. "They're offering money, but what they're really offering is displacement. They want us gone so they can build without resistance." "What's wrong with selling?" someone called out. "The money's good." "The money's temporary," Clara said. "But this land is permanent. These communities are permanent. If we all sell, Dust River dies. The school closes. The businesses fail. Everything we've built disappears." She paused. "The railroad is counting on us acting individually, competing with each other for their money. But if we stand together, we have power they don't expect." "What kind of power?" Tom Harrigan asked. "Collective refusal," Clara said. "If we all refuse to sell, they can't build the route they want. They'll have to negotiate, offer fair terms, maybe even reroute entirely." A rancher named Dutch Miller stood up. "That's a nice idea, Mrs. Boone, but you're a school teacher. You don't understand how these things work." Clara met his eyes steadily. "I understand how power works. I watched powerful men destroy my life in St. Louis because I was alone. But I'm not alone anymore. None of us are. We're a community, and communities have strength that individuals don't." "She's right," Margaret Harrigan said. "We stick together, or we all fall separately." The debate went on for 2 hours. Voices were raised, arguments erupted, but slowly consensus formed. By the end of the night, 27 ranchers had signed an agreement. They would refuse to sell to the railroad. They would negotiate only as a group. They would support each other if threats escalated. Silas watched Clara organize the resistance with quiet awe. This woman, who'd arrived unable to stop crying, was now commanding a room full of stubborn cowboys and making them listen. "You're incredible," he told her on the ride home. "I'm terrified," Clara admitted. "What if this doesn't work? What if the railroad finds a way around us?" "Then we'll deal with it," Silas said. "But you gave people hope tonight. You gave them a strategy. That's more than anyone else offered." 2 weeks later, the railroad sent lawyers. They threatened lawsuits, claimed eminent domain authority, promised to destroy anyone who resisted. The ranchers held firm. But fear was spreading. Then the accidents started. Tom Harrigan's barn burned down. No one could prove arson, but everyone knew. A week later, Dutch Miller's cattle were poisoned. Again, no proof, just suspicion and growing terror. Clara came home from school one afternoon to find Silas standing in the yard with a rifle. "What happened?" she asked. "Someone cut our fence lines," Silas said. His voice was flat, dangerous. 20 head of cattle wandered off. I found them 3 miles away, but we lost a day of work rounding them up." Clara felt ice in her stomach. "They're trying to break us." "They're trying to make an example of us," Silas said. "Show everyone what happens when you resist." "Then we show them what happens when you push people too far." That night, Clara called an emergency meeting. This time, 40 people showed up. Fear had spread, but so had anger. "They're counting on us being afraid," Clara said. "And we are afraid. That's reasonable. But fear without action is just surrender." She looked around the room. "We need to make this public. Every newspaper in the territory needs to know what the railroad is doing. Every politician needs to answer questions about whether they support terrorizing citizens." "How do we do that?" someone asked. "We write letters," Clara said. "Detailed accounts of every threat, every accident, every act of intimidation. We send them to every major newspaper between here and Washington. We make this a scandal they can't ignore." "What if that makes it worse?" Dutch Miller asked. It might, Clara admitted, but silence definitely makes it worse. At least this way, we fight back. The letters went out. Within 2 weeks, reporters arrived in Dust River. The railroad company denied everything, called the ranchers liars and troublemakers. But the newspapers printed the stories anyway. Public opinion began to shift. Politicians who'd been silent suddenly had questions about railroad expansion tactics. The pressure intensified on both sides. Clara received a letter at the school, anonymous, threatening, suggesting that teachers who caused trouble might find themselves without students. She showed it to Silas that night. "We can stop this," he said quietly. "I'll sell the ranch. We'll move. Start over somewhere safer." Clara looked at him. "Is that what you want?" "I want you safe."
I am safe, Clara said, because I'm standing beside you, because I'm not alone, because I finally learned that running from threats doesn't end them. She paused. We stay, we fight, and we win. Silas pulled her close. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." "I'm just done being afraid." The turning point came from an unexpected source. A journalist named Catherine Walsh arrived from Chicago. She'd been investigating railroad corruption for years. She interviewed ranchers, documented threats, photographed damaged property. Then she published a series of articles exposing the Montana Pacific Railroad's intimidation tactics. The articles went national. Suddenly, Dust River was national news. Politicians demanded investigations. Other communities facing similar pressure reached out for advice. The railroad's stock price dropped. Within a month, the company backed down. They offered new terms: fair market value for land, alternative routes that avoided forcing sales, compensation for damages. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The ranchers negotiated as a group, just as Clara had organized. They secured protections, guarantees, the right to remain on their land if they chose. Most chose to stay. The night the agreement was signed, Dust River threw a celebration. The whole town gathered at the schoolhouse. Music played, people danced. Children ran wild with excitement. Clara stood outside, watching through the window, overwhelmed by what they'd accomplished. Silas found her there. "You should be inside," he said. "You're the reason any of this worked." "We're the reason," Clara corrected. "All of us together." "They're calling you the woman who stopped the railroad," Silas said. Clara laughed. "That's dramatic." "It's accurate." Silas took her hand. "You came here with nothing, no reputation, no power, no support. And you built all of it from scratch. You earned respect through work. You created community through honesty. You fought corruption with courage." He paused. "You're not the woman who arrived crying on that platform anymore." "No," Clara said softly. "I'm not." "Do you miss her?" Clara thought about that. About the frightened girl fleeing scandal. About the shame and fear and desperation. "No," she said finally. "She needed to become someone else to survive. And I'm glad she did." Inside the schoolhouse, someone called for a speech. Clara tried to decline, but the crowd insisted. She walked to the front of the room with Silas beside her. "I don't have a prepared speech," she said, "but I'll tell you what I know. A year and a half ago, I arrived in Dust River with nothing but shame and fear. I'd been accused of something I didn't do. I'd been rejected by everyone who was supposed to protect me. I came here because I had nowhere else to go." The room was silent. "But Dust River gave me something I'd never had before. A chance to prove myself through action instead of words. A community that judged me by what I did, not by what others said about me. A partner who stood beside me when it cost him something." She looked at Silas.
And I learned that real strength isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and choosing to stand anyway. People were nodding. We faced the railroad together, Clara continued. We organized. We fought. We won. Not because any one of us was powerful, but because all of us together refused to be broken. She paused. That's what community means. Standing together when standing alone would be easier. Fighting together when giving up would be simpler. Choosing each other over and over again. The room erupted in applause. Later, as they rode home under a sky full of stars, Clara said, I never thought I'd have this. Have what? A home, a purpose, people who trust me. She paused. Love that doesn't demand I be anyone other than who I am. Silas pulled the wagon to a stop, turned to face her. I love you, he said. Not despite your past, not despite your damage, but because of everything you are, everything you've become, everything you choose to be, every single day. Clara felt tears sliding down her face. But they weren't tears of shame anymore. They were tears of joy. I love you too, she whispered. You gave me safety when I had nothing. You stood beside me when everyone else walked away. You believed in me before I believed in myself. They kissed in the moonlight, two broken people who'd become whole by choosing each other. The years that followed brought the ordinary challenges of life. Hard winters and failed crops, difficult students and ornery cattle, arguments and reconciliations, joy and grief in equal measure. But Clara never ran again. She taught for 30 years, educated 3 generations of Dust River children, became the voice people turned to when decisions needed to be made. She and Silas expanded the ranch, built a real home, created a life that mattered. Silas's nightmares never disappeared entirely, but they became manageable. Clara's fear of judgment faded into confidence. Together, they proved that damage doesn't define destiny, that broken people can build beautiful things, that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up consistently, honestly, courageously. On their 25th wedding anniversary, they stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset over land they'd fought to keep. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd sent me back on that first day? Clara asked. No, Silas said. Because I knew the moment you stepped off that stagecoach that you were exactly who I needed. How could you possibly have known that? Because you were broken but still standing, Silas said. Because you were terrified but still showed up. Because you were damaged but still honest. He took her hand. Those are the qualities that matter. Everything else was just details. Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. The man who'd said, "You're safe now," and meant it. The man who'd stood in a church and claimed her when it cost him everything. The man who'd given her room to become herself. We built something good, she said. We built something real, Silas corrected. And that was the truth that mattered most. She'd come west to escape her past, expecting nothing more than survival. Instead, she'd found a partner who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. She'd built a community that valued truth over rumor. She'd proven that a woman's strength isn't measured by what others say about her, but by what she chooses to do when tested. The mail-order bride who'd arrived in tears had become the woman who changed a town. The frightened refugee had become the teacher who shaped futures. The accused and abandoned had become the beloved and respected. Not through perfection, but through persistence. Not through being fearless, but through choosing courage when fear would have been easier. Not through hiding her scars, but through showing others that scars are proof of survival, not symbols of weakness. She'd learned the most important lesson of all, that real love isn't about finding someone who completes you, but about finding someone who stands beside you while you complete yourself. Silas had given her safety. She'd given him hope. Together, they'd built something stronger than either could have created alone. A marriage forged not in romance, but in respect, honesty, and the daily choice to keep choosing each other. The woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach, unable to stop crying, had discovered something powerful. She didn't need vindication from the people who'd wronged her, because she'd built a life that proved them irrelevant. She came west to hide from shame. She stayed to build something worth fighting for. And in doing so, she proved that the best revenge against those who try to destroy you is becoming someone they could never diminish. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real, you're honest, and you refuse to let their lies define your truth.